coronavirus lessons, and this is lesson number 2, titled Leadership. Significant lessons have emerged around the concept of leadership as we look at the way this virus has impacted the world and the response of a variety of nations. Now, I want to begin this section with one of my favorite quotes from William R. Bill Rhodes. He called The Banker to the World. And he said that with good leadership, any problem can be solved. This is a very broad statement, and every examination I make, I see the truth of this statement holding up. With good leadership, any problem can be solved. What have we seen in terms of the leadership of this process globally? Now, let's start with Texas Governor Abbott. He made an announcement at a specified time, way before any clarity had taken place in terms of the vaccine impact and rollout, that Texas would be opening up completely, getting rid of every restriction, no limitation to business. Now, a number of persons and institutions immediately responded. Why would somebody do something this downright stupid? And when you examine, looking backwards at the response of Texas in the United States to the pandemic, we saw that there were 254 counties in Texas, and there were 254 different systems and processes to contend with the virus, not to mention all the problems emerging from that. So Texas became the biggest US state to lift the COVID-19 mask mandate and to open business. Why would somebody do something like this? In light of what the science tells us? Remember lesson number 1, follow the science. Nothing in the science said that this would be doable, possible, useful, significant. But when somebody decides to give rise to other things other than following the science, we can see what happens. He's but one of a subset of the kind of leadership gaffes, so to speak, over the last couple of months as we navigate in the pandemic. Now, I'm going to give you a list of what we call the notorious 9. The leaders whose response to the coronavirus with a combination of denial, duplicity, and most of all, ineptitude. We can lead off with Donald Trump, with his unique mixture of ignorance, arrogance, misinformation, and lies. Do we need to even explain them? January 20th, 2020 said, we have it totally under control. It's going to be just fine. Then he went on to, in February, say, I think the virus is going to go away. It's just going to be fine. Then February 10th, he said, looks like by April, you know, in theory, when it gets a little warm, it will miraculously go away. And he continued on in this vein, on and on. February 26th, he said, the 15 cases in the United States within a couple of days is going to be down or close to 0. And every step of the way, this is a flu. This is just like a flu. It's going to disappear. And he continued on that path. The result, People died unnecessarily. So open my top of the class. Next, we look at Brazil. Bolsonaro. He believed that it's just a little flu. This continent-sized nation of 212 million faced more COVID deaths, way more than they ever should have had. Hospitals overflowed, policy in disarray, vaccine supply severely limited, and he continued on and on and on. The people of Brazil deserve better than that. Belarus. Alexander Lukashenko, the strong man. He made some very interesting statements. No one will die of coronavirus in our country. Follow the science. The result of his stupidity, people died unnecessarily. Mexico. The Mexican president again made his declaration and was so clear and confident in his victory over the virus that he released a Facebook video encouraging people to go out for dinner like I am doing. We don't need to take this serious. Huh? Leadership. Tanzania. While most countries were going into full lockdown or banning even, large gatherings, the president of Tanzania was instead telling people, go to your churches and mosque. Corona is the devil. It cannot survive in the body of Jesus. It will burn. This was his approach and the result of his government's response to the coronavirus, and people died unnecessarily. Turkmenistan. This is a case of a situation where this country is so unaffected by the virus that the president recently led a mass cycling event through the capital. None of the participants wore masks. Of course, it was highly unlikely, that it could be possible, that it could have as low a number of viral infections as he would like the world to believe. Because the country shares a border with Iran. And Iran is one of the countries most hard hit by the whole process. Number of people infected. Well, he announced that his country would not have a single citizen infected by the virus. But the information in this country is so highly controlled that we have no way to know what the real figure is. Again, leadership. North Korea, Kim Jong-un. He also was the one that is very dubious in his announced the corona outbreak. North Korea, officially speaking, is the sole Asian outlier as a virus-free haven. This country's trade and travel connection almost exclusively through China, where the first virus was observed. But nonetheless, he has declared that there are no incidents of coronavirus in North Korea. We can't believe that. Cambodia. A week after China began locking down, the Cambodia strongman leader declared to boot any journalists covering their face during a news briefing in this country. The Prime Minister does not wear a mask, so why should you? The result? No mask wearing. The result? People died unnecessarily. Zimbabwe. As the pandemic grew there, the president took action. He announced a series of measures, including immediate ban on gathering of more than 100 people. A day later, he went on to hold a political rally and gave a speech to several hundred people at a school in northern Zimbabwe, blatantly in violation of his own decree. When asked about it, he claimed his ban on large gathering didn't take effect for 2 days, so it doesn't really matter what he did now. Even though his own government had made it clear that the decree was immediate. The result? People died unnecessarily. So we see some examples of places where the leadership did not follow the science. The leadership believed that their will, their words would be sufficient to banish the virus. Lessons from this, folks? It does not work. The dictates of politicians, when they are in conflict with the pattern identified by the science, people die. Now, let's take a look at the other side of this leadership mandate. What do the countries with the best coronavirus response have in common? One simple thing, maybe not that simple. They are led by women. What does that tell us? Denmark, Iceland, Finland, Germany, New Zealand, Norway, Taiwan. Their response to the virus and ultimately the impact on the virus on the population has been exemplary. We see some things that earmark the leadership in these institutions. First of all, decisiveness. The leadership of Taiwan was very decisive. Back in January 2020, at the first sign of a new illness, she introduced 124 measures to block the spread without having to resort to lockdown. Immediately she responded. She's now sending 10 million face masks to, of all places, the United States and to Europe to help. CNN declared that this was among the world's best response, keeping the epidemic under control. Number of deaths reported, 6. Early decisive action. New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern also had early lockdown and was crystal clear maximum level of alertness she was putting the country under. She imposed self-isolation on people entering New Zealand very early when there were only just 8 cases in the whole country. She banned foreigners entirely from entering soon after. The result, as of mid-April, there were suffered only 4 deaths, where other countries were now talking about lifting restriction. She actually added more. She made all of New Zealanders return to a quarantine situation for 14 days. The result, the virus was kept in check. Iceland, the response was incredible. Iceland offered free coronavirus testing to all its citizens and will become a key case study of the true spread of fatalities as a result of COVID-19. Most countries have limited the testing of people with symptoms, but Iceland decided to go the whole hog. She decided to test everyone to make sure that she has the wherewithal to control the situation. Finland. Sanna Marin became the world's youngest head of state when she was elected in December 2020. It took a millennial leader to spearhead using social media influencers as key agents of battling the coronavirus. Recognizing that not everyone reads the press, she invited influencers of any age to spread fact-based information to manage the pandemic. In Norway, the Prime Minister Erna Solberg had a very innovative approach. She decided to have some television talks directly to the children. Hmm? Because look, you talk to the children, children will talk to their parents. She was building on the short 3-minute press conference that the Danish Prime Minister first introduced a couple of days earlier. She again had a press conference where no adults were allowed, and she spoke to the children, taking time to explain why it was okay to feel scared. The originality and the obvious honesty of these ideas impacted on everyone in the country. Started with the children. They now took it further on. Generally, the empathy and the care that the female leadership of the world used to communicate. It worked, and the result we now see. Now, when you compare these leaders to the strong men, to the leaders who decided not to work with the science, we see a totally different manifestation. The result, people died. They decided that they were bigger than the virus. They were more important than the virus. Their reality superseded that of the scientists. The result, people died. There have been years of research timidly suggesting that women leadership style might be different and really beneficial. But instead, too many political organizations and companies are still working to get women to behave more like men. Women resist. The world depends on you. These national leaders are case studies citing that the best response to the coronavirus leadership came from women. It's about time that men start to learn some of these things. It's time we recognize this, and we really have to set out to elect more women. So what does this leadership issue summarize for us? During a disease outbreak, vague guidance and ambivalent behavioral norm will lead to thoroughly flawed thinking. If a business is open, but it will be foolish to visit it, this is a failure in leadership. Why open the business? Why punish the people? Why give the people the option of making wrong decisions? Leadership should have taken the call. Other lessons of leadership: hope is not a strategy. When you bring people home, give them false hopes, whether they be tourists or locals, and you hope that things get better. One thing we know for sure: behavior is governed by consequences, not by hope. The other thing coming out of this leadership, I was going to say crisis, but the leadership exposition, as we see in terms of positive and negative, a corpse is not a customer. We have entered the final phase in this whole evolving pandemic, where political and economic decisions will start becoming more paramount with respect to health decisions and get a lot more weight. But the question, can we live with those decisions? At the bottom line, a corpse is not a customer. So we lose them. We lose everything. A wonderful saying by Greg Christie can also be used to summarize what we've seen on coronavirus leadership. Leadership is absolutely necessary in all the critical stages of our life. But he points out that cultural transformation and change does not happen by itself. It cannot. It has to be purposely led, inculcated, and nurtured. And the leaders that did this, people benefited, countries benefited. We also saw from this pandemic that when leaders insist on becoming rulers, they often lose the right to govern. because the public ultimately see through the charade and move away. The final thing that we saw from this was that what the leaders sow, the people reap. So when the leaders sow discord, ignorance, stupidity, the people reaped death. The lesson of leadership from the global pandemic.